This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center. Relax under the stars at the Arvada Center's outdoor amphitheater with their summer concert series running now through September. This season features big names like Melissa Etheridge, Tower of Power, Preservation Hall Jazz Band, Spin Doctors, and so much more. Prime MTV. Cracker, Spin Doctors. You know what? Melissa Etheridge was in there too. She doesn't get enough credit. Actually, I'm going to go to that show too. Put that on my calendar. For tickets and a full schedule of live concerts, visit arvadacenter.org. That's arvadacenter.org. Today on CityCast Denver, the Purina plant stinks. So North Denver neighbors are taking the global pet food company to court in the hopes of winning better air. Then Governor Polis signed another new law targeting Wyatt's Towing's predatory practices. Westward editor Patty Calhoun joins me to break down these stories and more news of the week. Today is Tuesday, June 4th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Patty Calhoun, good morning.
Good morning.
So we here at CityCast Denver have been spending a lot of time thinking about congressional district for the race, the primary race happening. Obviously, Lauren Boebert is the big name on that ticket, but there's 5 other people in this race. And honestly, I haven't noticed a big difference in them. Have you been thinking about this race at all?
Oh, I've been thinking about this race a lot because I happen to be involved with an old tourist attraction out in Lincoln County. So it falls into this area. And we've spent a lot of time out there talking to the different people of Lincoln County and all the way east and south. And you think, these people deserve someone who knows what's going on in their area. And you've got Jerry Sonnenberg, and you have Richard Holtorf, and you have Mike Lynch. You've got people who have represented the district, who understand it, and I think are definitely, they may not agree with me politically. We certainly have had our different debates out there, but the fact is they're very sincere and they care about their area. They want it to be better. They want to bring Eco-Devo there, but they want the right kind of development, and they don't appreciate carpetbaggers.
But do you think that's going to play into this race? Because as far as I can tell, it's not.
Oh, I think it does. But the problem is this is such a numbers game. You've got 6 candidates. So whoever gets the most votes out of, in the primary on June 25th will get the nomination. So Lauren Boebert arguably could get 20% and win, because I think Sonnenberg and Lynch and Holtorf could divide up.
Why don't you think they all backed one? Why didn't they just fall in line behind one of them? Because I agree with you. I think all of those guys know that area very, very well.
Well, the problem becomes this was their chance. And they were looking at it as, if you want to move up and represent your district on a national level in Congress, this is your opportunity. Will it come up again that your incumbent like Ken Buck will leave, and leave early even? That doesn't happen that often. So why should they give up? It's like a game of chicken, too. So if, say, Holtorf and Lynch pulled out and threw themselves behind Sonnenberg, Sonnenberg would certainly win the primary, I think. And if he pulled out and another one pulled out and they gave their support to the third, that person would probably win. So, but why do they have to do it out of the goodness of their heart? This is their chance to win. We don't see Lauren Boebert doing anything out of the goodness of her heart.
Well, and also, ballots are out. They're going out in the mail, I think, as we speak. So it might be too late to be one of those guys.
I think you probably still could. I mean, you've got 3 weeks, and that's enough time. I don't see people sitting, before they go tend the field to vote. I mean, I think they'll wait.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
They probably are wondering, where should we go with this?
I was going to say, I think a lot of folks are maybe just wondering, who do we think is going to do the best? Because I'll be honest, the forum that I went to, everybody on that panel, I think there was 6 of them, including Boebert, Deb Flora, Peter Yu. At any rate, I could see, I had trouble seeing the difference, because when it came down to this, quote, conservative values thing, they all kind of hit the same marks. But I think you have a point. People may take it personally, that someone has come into the district to represent the district.
Right. I mean, I think Deb Flora has a cance too, but she's not so much of that Plains mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, she's Dougco.
And she's done a lot of different things. So what are you watching any other races? Because we talked about the primaries this week with Marianne Goodland. There's some interesting stuff happening.
Well, State House, there's a lot happening. But when you think about District 1. I mean, here we have Diana DeGette, you've got Joe Neguse. These are not people going anywhere. So,
Right.
and those are the areas we cover more. So we're paying attention. We're kind of poaching. We're looking at District 3. We're looking at District 4 and 5, where you have, surprise, Dave Williams, the head of the Colorado Republican Party, has endorsed himself. And the endorsements is outrageous. And you really wonder what it's going to take to bring the Colorado Republican Party back to what it used to be. You've got the Bill Armstrong days. Again, whether or not you agree with him, these were conservatives with a small c. They wanted smaller government. They were sincere. They weren't showboaters. And you've got to be able to win a primary in order to get on the fall ballot, where I think Coloradans would be willing to vote for the right kind of conservative. But you've got to get them to the final ballot.
Yeah, and I think also Dave Williams endorsing Dave Williams is just a bad look for the GOP also. Because to me as a voter, I'd be like, how dumb do you think I am?
We haven't seen any good looks for the Colorado Republican Party, frankly, and that's the giant capital Colorado Republican Party. Not giant in the sense of membership, because it's dropping like flies, but they gave them like this little litmus test in order to be endorsed. And a lot of them said, no, we don't want any part of this.
We don't want to even be associated with this.
How you could even endorse yourself, although arguably maybe he said someone else did it, but and Jeff Crank maybe wanted no part of it, but they should have just left it blank for District 5.
I agree. That would have been well, I don't know. We'll just see how that shakes out for them, Well, let's get to our first story. This feels like a story as old as Denver. The Purina plant off I-70 stinks. We know it stinks. We've known this for decades. Many families who have lived in this area have had to deal with it, some of them for generations. Patty, how do you describe this smell of the Purina plant?
It smells a little animal wasty, stinky, mixed in with exhaust. So it does smell, and you smell it when the wind is going a certain direction. We have to remember that plant's been there a long time.
It has, but I mean, the neighborhood has been there a long time too.
Well, and I happen to live in a neighborhood that was also bifurcated by a highway. So when they decided to build the interstate highways, you had I-25 cutting through right in my backyard, clear-cutting houses all the way down to the South Platte. It goes along Washington Park. Some of these will never be reunited, these neighborhoods. Yeah. So that neighborhood suffered the same way the I-70 neighborhoods have suffered when it cut through 60-plus years ago.
Which also is a whole other pollution problem.
That's a whole other issue. But interestingly, when I-70 was being expanded, and there were proposals to move it up into Adams County. Those didn't really go anywhere because, as I understood it, no one ever really talked to Adams County about it, and they needed their support. But what is interesting is there was never seemingly a serious attempt to move the Purina plant, which could have been a compromise. And in fact, you'll notice, I mean, the way it was done, it goes right up to the Purina plant, but Purina wasn't asked to move like
they didn't get eminent domain either.
Families, right.
Good point.
So that's always been interesting to me, why you wouldn't say, hey, we've got a lot of land out by DIA. Maybe you want to move there.
I mean, they've moved the Pepsi plant. I mean, we've moved less smelly plants there. So that's a great point. Well, the reason that we're talking about it is because it's landed in court. Two North Denver residents who live in the vicinity of the Nestle Purina pet care plant in North Denver filed a proposed class action lawsuit in federal court over the smell. The lawsuit claims, quote, a properly designed, operated, and maintained pet food facility will adequately capture, remove, and dispose excess noxious emissions and will not emit noxious odors into the ambient air as fugitive emissions. Basically saying, Nestle's not doing their job. But again, this is something that's been happening for decades. What do you think why is this lawsuit happening now, Patty?
Well, we had a lot of discussion over the weekend on our comments page about this, and people are saying, oh, it's because transplants have more money and they're moving into the neighborhood. But let's remember, the smells go further than just that neighborhood, too.
Totally.
So it's not just the issue of gentrification of Globeville and Elyria Swansea, although that's an issue, too.
Yeah.
But I just think maybe it is smellier. And as air gets cleaner, it gets smellier in contrast. So I am sure there will be experts out there with their smellometers trying to prove what they can, but I'm still much more interested in, have they ever really tried to move it? Has the city made that move?
I feel like that hasn't even been part of the conversation. It's been just more of a how can we limit the smell versus remove the facility? or move the facility.
And maybe that is impossible, but I don't think it is. I mean, we certainly see eminent domain on other things. And let me bring up this one.
Yeah.
How about maybe they should have a referendum to move it? How about we have a referendum aimed at one business and one business only in Denver, and that is the Superior Slaughterhouse for lambs. That's the only business that is a slaughterhouse in Denver, and we're voting on it in November. Why couldn't we vote on the only pet food factory?
That's a good question. And we'll get to another very business-specific legislative piece that we'll talk about later. But something else I want to go back to, though, when you were talking about a lot of folks saying this is a gentrification, an outgrowth of gentrification, is new folks move into a neighborhood where people have been dealing with something for a long time. They make enough of a stink about it. And then all of a sudden it becomes more front page news or something. And something I saw really interestingly was the Denver Foos Instagram was posting about this, and the comment section was full of that commentary. A lot of folks saying, my family has dealt with this for decades. It's sorry that you can't handle it kind of thing, or go back to where you came from. And it's not like they have an ownership over this issue, but it's kind of like nobody cared before. Why should you be getting attention for caring about it now when no one would listen to us?
And let's remember, it's a class action suit. And I don't know that much about the background of the two who filed the suit, but obviously
there wasn't
others will
much
be joined in.
Yeah.
Right. So they could have lived there for 50 years. It could be that they just finally found a law firm that thought this was a good case to take. Case. So we need to know more.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see when it unfolds what happens. I loved this quote, though, from the class action lawsuit members. One of them said, it's like someone barfed in your backyard and then baked it in the sun, and then you put a fan on the smell to keep it circulating. And I was like, that's real. That is really what it is like. I can't imagine. I also live in a neighborhood like you and like folks in Globeville area, Swansea, where 6th Avenue cuts right through our neighborhood. And so I don't know. This is also just a conversation about how we actually maybe fix these urban planning nightmares we created.
Can you reunify? Or are there different ways to do it? And maybe reunification is never going to be possible totally up by I-70, because that's been there for decades. But you could create other amenities.
Maybe
for the
just,
neighborhood.
Or remove the issue. This episode is brought to you by the Museum of Outdoor Arts. The summer comes alive with a dynamic lineup of events during the Museum of Outdoor Arts Marjorie Park Uncorked series, featuring live music and artful entertainment. The Sculpture Park also hosts candlelight concerts and Rock the Block, a special series of live community lunch shows. The Museum of Outdoor Arts has teamed up with pioneering immersive artist Lonnie Hansen to bring you his newest permanent installation, The Cabinet of Curiosities and Impossibilities, immersing viewers in historic artifact collections, one-of-a-kind art pieces, and wonders that will surprise and delight your imagination. Many events are free and open to anyone, and you're invited to bring your own picnic. For a full schedule of events and more information, visit moaonline.org/events. That's moaonline.org/events. This episode is brought to you by Central City Opera. Central City Opera's Summer Festival is almost here. Don't miss your opportunity to experience exceptional musical theater and opera in the intimate and historic 550-seat Central City Opera House just 35 miles west of Denver. This year, their summer festival includes Pirates of Penzance, Girl of the Golden West, and Street Scene. The Central City Opera Festival runs from June 29th to August 4th, with tickets starting at just $31, and they are going fast. You can find tickets and a performance schedule at centralcityopera.org/citycast. Book tickets by June 30th and use the code CITYCAST at checkout for 20% off all performances after July 18th. Again, book using the code CITYCAST at centralcityopera.org/citycast. Well, our next story, you kind of hinted at it. We're coming out of the legislative session. Last week, Governor Polis signed the tow carrier regulation bill into law that would prohibit towing companies from basically cruising around private lots looking for cars to tow. The legislation was aimed, like you said, at one company, Wyatt's Towing. It's a company in Colorado with a strong presence. I think everybody has a Wyatt's Towing story. It's not often that laws are made with like one company in mind. What does that say to you about this situation with towing?
Well, and Wyatt's Towing in specific, because the Towing Trade Association was all for making changes that Wyatts didn't want, and that was to move the responsibility for paying for towing to the property owner rather than the car. And I guess then the property owner would have to then bill the vehicle owner, as opposed to having Wyatts hold you hostage and you have to pay or you don't get your car back. And maybe they'll sell the car, which was what the last legislation was set up to do. I was sitting at Burndown, if you've ever been there. So the new
I have it in
spot,
the old LaGrue's
and the
on
old
Broadway.
LaGrue's on South Broadway. And parking in that neighborhood is tricky,
tough.
just like parking in so many neighborhoods. And you look at these vast parking lots across the way where there used to be a Kmart that's empty, where there's an Albertsons, there's Bluebonnet, there's Imperial, but there is plenty of parking.
Oh my God. Most of that
Is empty.
development you're talking about is parking.
And they now all have signs. Every parking spot in there, not parking spot, but entrance into a parking like alley, has a sign that it's private property and cars will be towed. This was last month I was there, so May. And Wyatts Towing, they're like sharks. They are circling that parking lot. And so I wonder, do they have the permission they now have to have of, you have to be asked to tow a car. You can't have a generic ask from the property owners. It has to be fresh for each car. You can't email in advance. And I wondered, because I actually thought, should I risk it? Maybe I'll get a good story out of it, but I'll lose my car, maybe forever. I'd have to figure it out. But they were just circling like sharks. I think down on Broadway, this area, what a greater good to let people maybe park there if they could figure something out.
At least until they figure out what they're doing
maybe
with that.
have somebody, a parking attendant there who have a gate if you have to at night.
Yeah, and we've talked about this so many times on the show. We had Jill Locantori from Denver Streets Partnership on talking about this very issue, saying parking lots exist. Why don't we figure out how to better utilize them? Because like you say, Patty, this is a problem all over the city. There's a business, Burndown it's a nightclub essentially. They're going to have nighttime business. Why can't they utilize the parking lot of a restaurant across the street that closes at 8:00 or make some kind of a deal? So at least we're doing something with those lots and we're keeping people from getting towed. But this legislation sort of gets at the issue, which it seems like Wyatts makes a lot of money off of this.
Right. If you remove the profit motive, maybe that would change it. Because now maybe, and I don't know this, and maybe there's a kickback for these giant sea of parking that no one wants after 5:30 or 6 at night. You want to protect the businesses that are open.
Sure.
But there's a sea of parking. Why not protect the neighborhood, which
keep people from parking all over Baker.
You can't find parking. These are neighborhoods that don't have garages. A lot of them don't have driveways.
They're
they
smaller,
have no
older
parking.
neighborhoods. Yeah, that's really. I just thought, who is benefiting? Definitely Wyatts. Interestingly enough, though, like you said, the Towing Association was in support of this change, but the Colorado Apartment Association was not,
because they don't want to have to get into the business of paying for the towing.
Yes,
and of course, Wyatts doesn't want that. They want to be able to get the money.
Do you think that this will signal a shift overall for the towing industry here? Like, could we see this implemented in a way that might actually change things?
Well, there are enough legislators that are peeved, including Julie Gonzalez, who had her car towed.
We had her on the show to talk about her experience.
They will come up with a fix sooner or later. I mean, we had Phil Weiser fined them $1 million back last December, Wyatts, for their violations. So sooner or later, we will solve this. I don't think we need a referendum to ban Wyatts, too. I mean, we can say we don't like these 3 businesses and they have to go. But
I don't know. I'd support that because I have had one of those atrocious, went to a friend's house, parked in a apartment parking lot that by the signage I thought I was in the right place, came out, car was towed. The whole day's screwed. Have to find someone to take me to the tow place. Have to figure out how much it costs. You know what I mean? It's just, and it's expensive. And so
it is not the bargain of a Denver boot, for example. Wyatts Towing is more expensive.
Those too. Yes.
I've had those.
But we'll see. I do find it interesting though. And I like when legislators can speak from personal experience. I think that it really shows they are not only listening to folks, but they're like, I've been in your shoes too, and this really sucks. And that was something that Julie sort of went out with to explain to people. I had this experience. I don't think it's fair. And we're seeing some interesting legislation come out of it.
Right. And we're not saying that people should be able to park anywhere and violate people's rights. What we're trying to figure out is there a better way to use these massive parking spaces to make things clearer so people who want to park and are willing to pay $1 or whatever they would have to pay to go to Burndown or park in someone's parking lot when they think they're doing it right. There should be a way they can make it good if they've done something wrong without having to pay hundreds of dollars and maybe lose their car.
Totally. Well, we'll keep watching that to see how it goes. Again, the legislation has been signed into law. If it gets enforced is a whole other story. This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon, the farmer's market delivered. Pine Melon is a next-generation grocery delivery app that partners with over 200 farmers, ranchers, and producers in Colorado to help make fresh, locally sourced foods available to the Denver community at fair prices. Get high-quality meats, eggs, and dairy from small local farms, fresh baked breads from local bakeries, and more, as well as all of your favorite pantry staples. Best part is, Pine Melon offers same-day delivery to Denver and soon Boulder within a 2-hour window, no subscription necessary. Save time in your busy schedule and get fresh and healthy groceries delivered right to your door. Join the movement and support local today. Use promo code CityCastDenver for $75 off your first delivery at pinemelon.com. That's pinemelon.com. Before we go, we always love to hear from you, our brilliant and hilarious listeners, about the things you care about. Every Tuesday, we share a comment or answer one of your questions that's come through the CityCast Denver hotline. This time, we have a text, and I thought, Patty, you'd appreciate this. We heard from Gina J. She said, "Thank you for doing the feature on Riverside Cemetery. When we first moved to Denver almost a dozen years ago, we got a book called Walking Denver and used it to explore the cemetery. It's an incredible place for history buffs like me. I made my husky pose in front of a miner's grave, and we thought it was cool that birds pull all kinds of cloth for their nests from this area. And Silas Sewell's grave is so humbling." We talked to Skylar McKinley about his Riverside piece for you and Westward. Did you learn anything, or what did you find? I learned so much from just reading this. I thought I had known about Riverside, but there is so much more that he dug up. What did you think about this story?
And I've been out there every year for the healing, when the healing run goes, and it winds by Silas Sewell's grave. I loved the story. We thought it perfect for Memorial Day weekend, but I learned that it was the first integrated cemetery, which I hadn't known. Skylar, as he said, learned something, because he originally pitched it to me as like, oh, it's falling apart, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, it's a more hopeful story. And we're hoping that we, just from some talks we've had since we published that story, that there may be more hope on the horizon, help at hand, just to be able to provide what they need to do more xeriscaping, to deal with what it used to be, which is plains.
Yeah. I did love that aspect of the story, which is this is also about our dwindling water situation, and how graveyards of the future might not be as grassy, but it doesn't mean that a place like Riverside is neglected. It just looks different than we expected it to.
So it's not going to be that lush old green lawn we used to see, or you see when you're looking at, Arlington.
I was going to say Fort Logan here.
We're going to have, it's going to be more scrubby prairie, but it can be beautiful too.
Totally. Well, this was a fun story. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. You can hear from Skylar himself about that piece. Patty, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Nestle Purina Pet Care CEO Nina Lee Kruger about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya. I got some day-old sheet cake to eat. I need to go. That's what I should have brought for lunch.